Ladies and gentlemen, hello. My name is Will Tarashuk, and I am a podcaster. And today is something a little different. If you're listening on the Talking with Tarashuk feed, first off, welcome back. You know my voice, everyone on this podcast. If you're listening on a different feed, hello and welcome, because people don't know that our RSS feeds can hold multiple things of audio. But today, I'm speaking with a new podcaster, a friend of mine by the name of Buse Ceylan. Jalen?
Yes.
See, I told you.
Yes.
I always screw it up. When we start recording.
You did. You actually didn't.
So, okay. So,
You got
pronounce
that.
your name. Pronounce your name for full.
Buse Ceylan.
Buse Ceylan.
Yep.
Okay. There we go.
Thank you.
See? So, yeah, that's I guess, lesson number one of podcast. If you screw up a name, make sure they correct you in person and embarrass yourself. So,
But you didn't screw up, so you're good.
In my
You're
mind,
good.
I did. So,
you're good.
we're here to talk about your podcast because you were going to start a
Yeah.
podcast. So, first off, just tell me, a little about yourself, who you are,
Okay.
and what your plan is.
I am a medical student. I just started my third year, and I've been studying medicine, whether that's medical school or pre-medical school, for about 8 years now. And it was it's a very long period of time. And I kind of wanted to start getting into different things, not just as an outlet, but to merge it with medicine. And I thought starting a podcast is the best way to do that. Just not to talk about my life, or not just to interview doctors, which is a great idea, but to also just talk about mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about how it really is, not in the hospital, but outside of the hospital, because it's a tough field. And so, yeah, I'm a medical student who's just taking her first steps into this world.
Well, it's interesting how nowadays real stories from real people get real results.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to a lot of what you would see on like TV or like news coverage about the medical field. It's filtered, right?
Very.
It's very filtered.
Very.
In a podcast, it takes that filter away.
Yep.
Like one of the big benefits is there is no FCC, right? The FCC regulates all of TV and film based on the certain guidelines, and then with TV, even at the local news, what have you, it gets filtered through advertisers and their donor and people who fund them.
Mm-hmm.
Podcasting doesn't exist. The only filter you have is your audience. The only filter you have is yourself. So what is your plan? So you want a medical podcast about mental health.
Mainly, yeah.
So how are you going to take that filter away?
I want to talk about, on my first episodes, definitely, I want to talk about how we get into the medical field and how a lot of us are conditioned to think a certain way, to act a certain way, to compose yourself a certain way, and the effect that had on my mental health. And a lot of us are told that we can't do this right now because we're supposed to be studying. This might not even be seen as professional to some doctors. And what I plan on doing...
It won't be. Definitely not.
Yeah. I plan on just kind of talking about the things I went through. And if people can connect with that, that's a great thing. But also talking to other students. I had a very rough last 8 years in this field. And the only reason why I didn't give up is because I loved it so much. But I see a lot of my friends starting to give up on it because it could get very depressing. You don't really hear and see people that are going through what you're going through. On social media, if there's someone posting about their life, it's very edited. It's very much so, I mean, in a good way, like they're trying to inspire you, but no one really sits down and says, man, so tell me about your life, because it's so dark sometimes. All you do is study. You're told you can't have a social life. You're told you can't do other things because you shouldn't be. You should be devoted to medicine because it's a very long journey. And I'm just here like, well, we could still be devoted to medicine and jump on a podcast and talk about it.
Well, at least with the medical field, it's such a clear pathway to success, right? You go to college, you get your good grades. Then from there, if you get good grades, go to med school. From med school, from there you can get your fellowship or your residency,
then...
whatever you get. And then from there, you're pretty much set up. You have all this debt, but the pathway to success is very much laid out in front of you. For you. So where would other than the stress of all the work and all the studying and all the time committed where else would the stress really come from? Because of podcasting, right? Like me, my stress comes from there is no foundation.
Yeah, you gotta figure
I'm alone.
it out.
I'm alone. Like all I have is my teammates.
Yeah.
All I got is my podcast, and all I have is myself. There is no set pathway for me to take.
Yeah.
Which is a different type of mental stress and financial stress. But it's like, I guess, what is the real mental stress, or is it really just the time, work, and dedication?
So people think that there is a clear pathway, and I agree with it. That's what it appears to be. I was never on that clear pathway. I never got good grades. I failed out of college. And I saw that this foundation that was laid out is not to help you get into medical school and become a doctor. It's to filter you out. And I get it. You don't want doctors who don't study and do their work. But then there are just some people who are good students. They're hardworking and just need additional help. And I was one of them. And you know how you just said you're alone because there's no real, well, you're alone in medicine too. There's no community that I've seen that I was able to, and I looked hard because I was that outlier. There's no community that really says, hey, we're here with you. You're not alone. You are alone. As long as you do these things, you might get in. 16% of students in the pre-med program in America continue. Only 16%. Now, whatever happens to the rest of that, it may be because they just didn't want it anymore. But from my life, my experience, what I've seen is people just felt alone. When you go to a pre-med advisor, if you're not getting those A's and B pluses, they discourage you.
Is it cutthroat?
Very.
Interesting.
And it's not just cutthroat inside of that university or that medical school. It's very cutthroat among friends. And you just start to think, well, I'll only have a community if I'm successful. But in order to be successful, sometimes you do need a community.
Yeah. And sometimes you got to be cutthroat.
Yeah. And if there are medical students out there who are depressed, who feel like they're not good enough because they're not getting those good grades, or it's just so competitive and their pre-med advisors are telling them, don't put all your eggs in one basket. You should think of another career.
Yeah.
Well, you can start listening to me because I went through hell. I want to talk about it. And that's the awesome part about podcasting. You don't need to know that person who's listening in order to build that connection. They can listen to you and be like, oh, damn, I'm not alone. Like, someone's going through this.
Are you a big podcast listener yourself?
I'm now, yeah.
You're getting into it?
Yeah.
So the weirdest thing for me when I first started listening is, nowadays there's a lot of video. You can see what the person looks like.
Yep.
But for me, when I started listening back in 2012, 2013, I had no idea what these people looked like. So I created a character for them in my head. And then when I first saw them, I was like, not at all what I thought. I don't know what my point with that was, but yeah, I don't know what my point with that was.
I kind of get that though, because it's like having a pen pal that you can't really talk to.
The community. The community, because you do feel that personal connection with someone. Like,
you don't need to see them.
I don't know if you've heard my podcast acronym, but a podcast is a personally or professionally, depending who you're talking to, oriented discussion centered around select topics.
Oh, I hadn't heard that one.
That's what podcast stands for.
Oh, that's
really
good.
A Will Tarashuk original.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's 100% my own.
You are good in this.
Yeah. So, and the P stands for personal. You can talk to Jared, he'll tell you, it should be written on my forehead. The P stands for personal. Or in your case, it can be a blend of both, because it's personal and it's professional. So you want to build that community in the medical community. Oh, I already exist. I'm a med student. So are you going to target more your audience now? Are you going to target more med students, people who want to get into medical, college kids, already doctors, patients?
It's gonna be a little bit of everything.
Anyone who cares.
Probably, probably my first target will be, because I want to go in order. I want to start my first episodes on how I got into it, and then how I was totally off that rail. I was furthest thing from that path, and then how I ended up, even though I didn't take that path, I ended up back on it, and just kind of be like, hey guys, there's hope. Don't listen to those pre-med advisors that are trying to be cutthroat right now. Like, because a lot of them do, because there's no community they can go to and be like, oh, because when I was going through it, I had to, it was my way of trying to find relief. I Googled a pre-medical student with 2.3 GPA got accepted to medical school. And there was like Reddit pages.
Reddit posts. So you got to go to Reddit.
And it was so discouraging. And then when I did get into medical school, I started finding some people that kind of related. So then I'll talk about my medical school experience and just go in order, and definitely want to be talking to doctors, but not in the sense of, so how's it like being a doctor?
Yeah, a more you dig deeper.
Yeah.
Right, because when you have someone like that on and you have a podcast like that, it's very easy to kind of fall into the basic generic questions.
Yeah.
And those are fun to start off with. Like anytime I talk to someone new, like I got a financial planner coming on in a few weeks, you know, the basics of, you know, who are you, what do you do, and what pretty much like what got you here, why did you choose this path, just as like a solid icebreaker foundation. You know who that person is, your audience knows who it is, but then you can get right down to the nitty gritty. And it's like if it's finance, like, okay, why is the economy is how it is, and why do people say it's good, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, we're gonna talk about this now,
Yeah.
right? But like, you guys set that foundation. But yeah, talking to a doctor, what are your concerns about trying to talk to doctors?
Was it worth it?
That's yeah.
I mean, I love this field. Just if anyone knows my past, they'll know I love this field. But there's always that fear of like, oh God, I'm giving up a decade. I'm going to give up some more. And then I'm going to be away from my family, which is what a lot of us are trained to think. But come to find out, you actually don't have to be. There's ways around that too. But I just want to talk to a doctor who's been through it and ask, not, well, why'd you get into medicine? What do you love about it so much? Everyone has their own answer.
Yeah.
But was it worth it? If you could go back, would you do it again?
Yeah.
Or would you pick something else?
Well, like, how did because even as for students, right? Like, you know, you're like fresh in college, right? So, you know, you want to be, I don't know, a heart surgeon, right? And you know, since you got into college, like that's what you want to do. You're bright-eyed, 18 years old. You know, you go through school. You're still bright-eyed because you don't know how hard medical school really is. You have things, but you don't really know now. You get through medical school, and then by that point, all the debt's mounted up, all the hard work is done, and it's just like part of you, you're not that bright-eyed 18-year-old anymore. Some of you, you're definitely jaded. Like it's gonna change you, and like, is it possible to anticipate that change, and how do you react to that change? Because I think of that myself too with podcasting, right? Like, how is success gonna change me? It's not will it, it's how will it.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I don't want to get jaded, but I think that can happen with anyone who comes to success, but even specifically in medicine, because you work so hard, you get so much debt, you get to a point kind of like, you know what, screw everyone else, I'm in this for me now, because you have to be.
I saw it change people 3 ways. One, I saw them grow and mature and not be so bright-eyed, be maybe a little jaded, but a little more, I hate using the word realistic, but
it's a good word though.
I hate using it, but for lack of a better word, realistic, and just, you know, realize that this is going to be a hard path. It's not meant to be easy. No one said it was going to be easy, and the issue is not that it's hard. That's the thing. And then I see it change people as in they get very depressed. I recently lost a friend last year to suicide because of this. And she didn't want to quit because she didn't want to disappoint her family. There were so many years that were spent on it. And that's the one big motivator in doing this, trying to get people to come out of their cave. Like, no, you don't need to give up your whole entire life. You can do things. You can, because a lot of us, we don't party, we don't socialize, we don't go out. I mean, don't get me wrong, I have a lot of friends that do, but a majority of us, we don't. So like, come here, there's a community here. You can just listen while you're preparing your notes. But the third way is, I've seen it change people as in they let I've been through this, I made it get to their head.
Egos.
Huge egos. And like, I was just talking to a friend a couple days ago. She just was finishing up her residency. She works at a very nice hospital. Not gonna say where, and I don't want to give away too much, but in medical school she used to cry a lot. Like, she was very depressed. And now she seems very happy. And she told me, being a doctor is harder, medical school is nothing. I was like, that's very discouraging. Like, you're disregarding all of our feelings. She was like, well, you guys have it easy right now, wait until you're a doctor. And I was like, I got one question for you. Do you still cry though? She was like, no. Like, so? You used to spend every day crying.
Mm-hmm.
You don't cry anymore. You get paid. It's like,
Money solves a lot of problems in this country.
that's a big issue too. Like in Turkey, medical students get paid. As soon as you enter rotations,
Really?
you get minimum wage salary.
Interesting.
Yep. But that's another topic for another day. But yeah, it changes you. You don't come out the same as you walked in.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be in a bad way. It could be in a good way. Medical school and the pre-medical track is a lot of growth. It's just you kind of have to navigate how that goes.
So how do you think, like, say it blows up, right? You know, it just runs through New York City and like all the doctors are talking about it or whatever. Just like all like NYU medical students are just like, you gotta listen to this podcast. It's crazy. It's fucking crazy.
That'd be cool.
Like, could you see there be any heat on you?
Oh yeah.
For like not like, I don't want to say exposing the business.
Yeah.
But exposing the business.
Yeah.
And like, you know, you wanna tell the truth. You wanna be honest. But you also want to keep that door open for doctors and experts to come and talk to you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm still trying to get accepted to residency. But you know, even coming here, my mom was just like, be careful, don't hurt no one's feelings. I was like, Mom, if their feelings are meant to be hurt off of me just being honest, like I'm not a rude person most of the time.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that, because at this point that shouldn't, like, there's too much to lose for me to not speak up.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of things that are messed up in this field, but I'm not trying to just talk about it. I've literally created a non-for-profit organization that's trying to fix it. So it's not like, hey, this is a problem, why are you guys doing this? Like, so this is a problem, but if you could work with us, here's kind of a solution for this.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm gonna get a lot of heat. I know I am. You can't please everybody. A lot of people are just gonna be annoyed that.
See, but in this day and age, it's almost better to annoy people.
Yeah.
Than to make them happy.
Yeah.
Because the more you annoy people, and like I'm not saying being annoying on purpose. I annoy people plenty on the Talking with Tarashuk podcast. Sometimes on purpose, sometimes not on purpose. But that annoyance gets attention. And that attention is everything. Like when you're making content, you're going to upset people. Like that's inevitable. That's just what happens. But also know people who aren't vocal or can really appreciate what you're saying. And those are the ones that matter. Like the ones, well, matter is a frame of mind. The ones who matter are the ones who comment and respond and get you attention, to get you sponsorships, this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
That only matters in terms of finances, in terms of growth. But the ones who really matter are the ones who don't say anything, who actually agree with you. I think.
Yeah. I mean,
it can be hard. You know, they say don't read the comments. I disagree, because you have to read the comments. Because, well, one, it's how in the early stages you have to interact, you have to engage, you have to comment. It helps the algorithm, it helps you, and if someone interacts with you, they're more likely to follow you, which only helps you in the long run.
Yeah.
However, you're going to get to a point where you become so big where it's impossible to read all the comments, and that's when you just stop cold turkey. You just let it go.
I guess in my mind, if you as a listener have a problem with just hearing medical students not complain about being medical students, because that's another thing. When you complain, you get that backlash of, you're in medical school, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to make so much money.
Yeah, what are you complaining about? Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, you just can't sympathize with other people. Like, I hope you could work on that, though. You know, like, that's my reaction to that. I hope you could grow one day. Like, just try to get a little bit more sympathy. But if a listener has a problem with me talking about my journey, getting other students on my podcast, talking about, like, the things behind that pretty curtain and the things that they go through in the hospital, outside of the hospital, the corrupt pre-med advisors in these colleges that charge you so much money every year, then your problem isn't me. It's not my podcast. It's something else.
Yeah.
Because we're not calling anyone out. We won't be. I'm not. We're not trying to stir something up. And if there's doctors like my friend who now roll their eyes at medical students or pre-medical students complaining, I'll just be like, just try to remember those days because you went through it too. And if you didn't, yay, you're privileged. You're lucky. So,
so luckily you got one of the hardest things down. You got something to talk about, right? You got something you're passionate about. You got something you're knowledgeable about, and you have ideas. Podcasters will always be like, I need to have guests, or I need to have a co-host, or I need to do a solo show. But you can do both. You can do all three. You could have a roundtable discussion. Like, people always go like, what should my podcast be? And I just go, it's whatever you want it to be. It can be literally whatever you want it to be. Talking with Tarashuk, half the time, it's conversations like these where we're sitting down and discussing something. Other times, it's my friends and family who we just kind of talk and love the glory days or what have you. Other times, it's random strangers I met on Facebook. And other times, it's me and Christian in this studio asking random lists of questions. But it's all the same podcast.
Yeah.
It's all the same podcast. It's just, what's the podcast this week? It's whatever I want it to be. So, would you rather have more guests, more solo shows, or what would you prefer? Because there really is no difference. It comes down to preference.
Oh, that just unboxed a lot of questions I have for you. But,
okay, shoot.
To answer your question, I rather have more guests because I can also much contribute to this field. I can only talk about what I'm going through. But what would be cool is if a lot of people started talking about what they're going through, so that the ones that are depressed, the ones that are, because there's a shortage of doctors in this country. Like, there's a severe shortage. And my theory is that a lot of people are looking at this field like, oh my God, I have to sell my soul and not do anything else for a decade. And I'm just like, no, you can go in this field and then just come here to talk about it, make your own content, create your own podcast, your own channel. It's therapeutic. Talking to even just a microphone about the things that you're going through is very nice. And that's amazing if someone can connect with you. So I'd rather have a lot of guests, get a lot of voices out, a lot of stories out. My question for you is, if a medical student wants to create a podcast, do you think, like, for example, like me, should they have that niche? Should they kind of use it like a diary? Does it matter?
It depends what they want to do, right? Like, just because they are a medical student and medical student is a lot of their life doesn't mean their podcast necessarily has to be about medicine, right? It can be about NASCAR. Maybe they're really into NASCAR.
Yeah.
But if they're looking for it to be a part of their career, I think it should be about medicine. It should be about what you're doing. You could talk to your classmates. You can talk about what you're learning currently. What someone, the studying process, and we got a final coming up. Like, how are you prepping for that?
Yeah.
Right? Because it's just a way to bounce off ideas. Like, it's pretty much a conversation you'd have at the lunch table, just microphone instead of like a sandwich.
A lot of students stray away from things like that because they think it's going to be so time consuming and it's going to take them away from their studies. Is it time consuming? Because I personally don't think it is. Like you just said, it's a lunch table talk. Just record it.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't have to be. Like, what I do is incredibly time consuming. That's because it's my job, right?
Yeah.
I make it time consuming. In reality, all you really need, if it's if it's in person, you need a little more equipment because you're gonna need 2 mics. If it's over remote, like if you're at home and you want to do it over Zoom, and the guest wants to do it over Zoom, you only need a USB mic. It helps if they have a mic, but they don't necessarily need one. Successful podcasts don't need this crazy grandiose.
They can just start with anything.
They can start with anything.
As long as they start.
Yeah, as long as you start. So does it need to be time consuming? It doesn't have to be. It can help. Like, you want good sounding audio. Video helps because it's another medium. There are other avenues to do, but if it just kind of is raw and gritty, that can still be successful. Because look at the biggest budget podcast. Like, if CNN came up with a podcast, no one listens to that. No one cares. They can put $1 million behind it. People don't care. People care more about what you have to say than how it looks like when you're saying it.
And so I love how we're tying these two together. It fits perfectly. Would you would you say that there is a possible way of also making money when podcasting?
Yeah.
I'm asking because medical school is expensive. And if someone can hit a hobby or an outlet or a way of expressing themselves and just getting out of that field for a moment, like an hour a day, just get your head out of there and make money while doing so, like just doing something fun, that is also a great thing. So how would one do that if you can do that?
That's a great question for Jared. But making money through podcasting, working with APS, you know, for a medical student, it would be hard because, you know, you don't have anything to sell, really, right?
I guess it would just be your audience.
It would be your audience. So you would want to find sponsorships in the field, you know, like...
Actually, that's not hard either because there's so little people doing this right now that...
If there's a hole for it, you can find, like, BetterHelp.
I think that anyone who wants to create their channel can easily get sponsorships from a lot of brands. BetterHelp is someone who does advertise on podcasts. Okay.
And you know BetterHelp, it's like online therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they do sponsorships. They do a lot of YouTube channels as well. Different like On It supplements. Like there are health and fitness sponsorships out there. What I would do is if you're trying to find sponsorships, go listen to podcasts that are similar in your field and just listen to their ads and just jot down the advertisers and just find a pattern.
That's smart.
So like I listen to a lot of Joe Rogan. I had a time for like a month. I wrote down all of his sponsorships and just to see what was there and what the thread was, what the connection was.
That makes sense.
Who is their target audience and how does that line up with mine, right? Or a wrestling show I did. It's a lot of this a wrestling show I follow. Excuse me. A lot of the same advertisers. It's also targeted towards men, 18 to 40. That's mostly probably who listens to podcasts, unless it's a murder podcast, then it's targeted towards women. Like if you listen to like My Favorite Murder or other true crime podcasts, you'd probably find a lot of the advertisements there are probably geared toward women. So if you're trying to make money, I would start there. Just try and find a pattern for what advertisers are looking for and try and figure out what makes those shows successful and how you can follow that path as well as divert and find your own little niche.
There's definitely a way of doing it.
Yeah, but if you want to make money, the first thing you need is an audience.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need a following. You got to be out there. You know, TikTok is great right now. The most growth I'm seeing right now is on TikTok. Instagram makes me want to throw my phone out a window, but it helps to put it all there as well because they're trying to make the push for Reels.
Yeah.
YouTube Shorts, you know, I had a pretty rough September, but towards the end of September, it was kind of out of nowhere, gotten a bunch more views. So growth is slow but steady. If you're going into the podcast to make money immediately,
it's not probably,
don't.
I'm saying they should get into it because it's very therapeutic.
Yeah. I mean, it's always cliche to a point, but yeah, I've called podcasting therapy for years. I am my most authentic self on a podcast. It's like, you know, I get very uncomfortable at like networking events or public speaking or when there's a lot of people around. Sometimes I kind of freeze up. At college parties, I always froze up. But on a podcast, it's just different. I'm in more control.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm in control and I'm not afraid. If that makes sense.
Yeah, you're speaking your truth.
Yeah, it's just easy to talk. It's easier.
If you don't want to listen, just go turn it
off.
off.
Yeah, if they don't listen, who cares? Although it is kind of weird for me. Like I was at a family party this past weekend. Shout out to my cousin Kevin and Hannah for getting married. And all my aunts and uncles would be like, you know, your podcast, this, that, and the other. Like, you know, you talk about this. And I kind of just like, I don't like talking about it. Like, you know what I mean? It's just like, it's like,
I get that.
Especially certain segments from Talk with Tarashuk. It's just like, because me and Christian will be pretty wild sometimes.
Yeah, I know.
But it's just like, oh, they had to bring up that one, right? But it's just like, it's
I hear a second of it, I'm like, whoa.
Yeah, it's a little weird hearing, like, I like my podcast in my internet bubble, right? I like it, you know.
Yeah.
When it comes into the real world and talking to actual people, it's a little uncomfortable still. But, you say, thanks for listening. I appreciate it. And this, that, and the other. I know, don't swear as much. Sorry.
So, just as a basic summary, how do you start your podcast? Like, aside from just getting a microphone and the equipment that you need, where do you record, and how does, and just, yeah, basically, if you could run it down.
Yeah, well, where to record? Just a quiet room. I recorded in my apartment for years. I recorded in a college dorm room before that.
And what do you use to record?
I used like a mixer. Nowadays, you can get like a 2-channel interface, which is just a little box like the one you see on the floor over there. Little box, it's an XLR cord. This is what connects it to the mixer, and that usually connects into your computer via USB. Then from there, you would need a recording software, something like an Audacity, which is free, Adobe Audition, which is probably like $23 a month, which is what I use for recording and editing. If you want to get a little more high tech, you could get a bigger interface, which lets you record like my audio and your audio in 2 different files, which is easier for editing. But just for the most basic bare bones, like if you want to do a podcast just by yourself, you need like a $100 USB mic, plugs right into your computer. Any recording software, whether it's free or paid for, will pick it up. You just gotta change your settings. If you're at home, just try and find a quiet room. Like I live on a main street next to a fire station, so that could be problematic when I'm recording. But that also that happens. That's unavoidable. But if you're trying to record, just kind of pick up the equipment, start playing around with it, and just find out what works. Like, how did I figure all this out? I just bought some stuff and played around. I still play around.
Just have fun with
I still kind of figure it out. Like, no one taught me.
Yeah, we were just talking about that. I didn't have a
mentor. I didn't have a teacher. I just had the will and the dedication to do it. I learned Adobe Audition in school. That helped, but I didn't go to the recording studio at Hofstra University. I did it for the radio, and I was on the radio, but I didn't do it for my podcast. I did it all on my own.
Yeah, you gotta figure it out.
I reached out to, like, I remember the first podcast I ever recorded, my laptop wasn't powerful enough to handle, didn't have enough RAM, didn't have enough memory in the laptop. So like the audio recorded, but it skipped. It wasn't a clean recording. So I Facebook messaged someone from Hofstra. It was like, hey, you're a tech guy at the radio station. Like, I tried doing this. What was wrong? He's like, what's your RAM on the PC? I was like, how do you check that? Right? So, and then it turns out I need to upgrade my computer to get more RAM. So I called my dad. I was like, my birthday's like around the corner. Can I buy a new laptop? And I got a new laptop. And then from there, I figured it out. Nowadays, RSS feeds are handled through distribution platforms. Those weren't around in 2015 when I started. Like, an Anchor wasn't around. An APS, when the app is finished, wasn't around. I did it through WordPress, through a plugin. How I got to code into an RSS feed onto the platforms, because back then it was only iTunes. I only put it on iTunes. That was really all that was around. I don't know how I did it, to be honest, but I did it. And I figured it out. And I messaged a podcaster I followed. I found him on Facebook. I was like, hey, how do you do this? And I just figured it out and asked questions. But in terms of how to start, like, those are technical questions. How do I start recording? Is this like, well, you buy a microphone and you plug it in and you hit play. Yeah. You hit record.
It's a lot simpler now, especially when you see people do it, and there's companies like APS that you can go to.
Yeah. But that's really it. You just don't be afraid. Just make mistakes and figure it out.
Yeah.
You can record something and not release it.
And another thing that I want to know if you agree with is, I'm not just encouraging students to get on a podcast, whether they want to talk about medicine and get some sort of therapy, closure, outlet, or just expression out of it, but also, do whatever you want, whatever field you want. It's fun. Try it out. But also doctors. I think it's a very nice way to increase your credibility in whatever research or whatever field you're in, whatever research you're doing. I mean, do you not agree?
No, I totally agree. Yeah, no, some of the best podcast episodes I've ever listened to were with doctors, neuroscientists,
I think
whatever.
It's so beneficial when they get that information out there, because a lot of people don't just open up a book and read or look at research articles. They want to watch TV and listen to a podcast.
One of the best is Dr. Rhonda Patrick. She has been on multiple podcasts. I don't know if she has her own, but she's like a nutritionist and like gut health and stuff like that. So for me, it's extra fascinating whenever she pops on. So like when COVID first started, a few months into it, she was on Rogan, and I was just like, okay, here's someone I can trust, right? And with information, because these doctors come on, you talk to them forever in an open conversation, they're more trustworthy. Like I do trust my doctors I currently see in person because I have great relationships with them and they're great doctors. But specifically on COVID, when New York City was firing doctors for like not following certain mandates, I was just like, ooh, even though I trust my doctor, I can't trust that what they're saying is really what they believe because their job potentially might be on the line.
That is true.
And that was hard as a patient because, I wasn't like afraid of the vaccine or whatever, but I was afraid to ask questions because I didn't think I was going to get an honest answer. Yeah. Even if it was honest, there was that little sliver of doubt that they could just be trying to save their ass.
Yeah, like you're about to lose your job if you say otherwise.
Yeah, like, there's politics and everything, but especially in medicine, there's a lot of politics.
Which I will be getting into.
You got to deal with the insurance companies, which is a big old main event bully mafia, and you got to deal with the big pharma, which is even bigger main event mafia.
I almost lost my own dad to those mafias. So when you're like, are you afraid or do you think you're going to get heat? You said, do you think you're going to get heat? I'm like, yeah, but it's going to be worth it.
Yeah, those are the people you want to go after.
Get heat from that.
And there's going to be a lot of people going to go, can't talk about that. But you as a host have to make the decision. Okay.
Says who?
We'll talk around it. Or you got to be like, I'm sorry, I can't have you on then. Yeah. Because that's the thing. Like if you're going to prepping a guest is huge. Yeah. Like as a host, because you're gonna be you're a host. It is a time commitment that aspect because you don't want to just. I would not suggest to someone they go in cold. Like I can do it because I'm confident I can do it with most people.
A pro at this point.
I came in cold to this. I just want to know what do you want. I was like, what do you want from me? I was like, great, I can work with that. I'll figure it out. But for anyone who's just starting, some doctors might ask for questions beforehand.
Yeah, and which that's understandable.
For me personally is just like. No. Like, I want to just tell him no.
I get it, though. I'm like, okay, I can't tell you all the questions that I might ask you because some are just on the spot.
Some on the spot.
Most of them are. Like, that's what's nice. That's what I like about podcasting. If it's genuine, if it's with the flow, like what we're doing right now. None of this is composed. But I get the major ones that I want to ask that are on my mind. And if you want to know it, sure, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
But I will also warn you that that's not all.
Like, I will tell them beforehand, hey, here's what I'm thinking. I wrote up questions on this, that, and the other. Is there anything, like, you don't want? Is there anything that's off limits? Like, always ask your guest before you start recording, is there anything I am not allowed to ask you? Because they are your guests. You got to treat them with respect, even if they are silently an asshole. Right? Like, if you have Mark Zuckerberg on... Right, there's gonna be some things he can't talk about, and it's important to get that groundwork out. And it can be even someone who's a baseball coach, right? Even he coaches high school baseball. Is there anything I can't talk about the high school? Yeah, my job could be on the line. Got it, clear. Yeah. Or we can go. You know what? Doesn't matter.
Especially in medicine too, you can't talk about patients.
Yeah, you can't break HIPAA laws. Yeah. So you have to toe that line, but that's just. Honestly, it's guess and check and asking questions. One thing about podcasting you're going to find is that you're going to be in normal conversations and you're in podcast mode where you just slip into it and you start asking questions in everyday life. Like I was in a work meeting last week and, it was easy for me to just ask questions about this conference we got coming up because I got into podcast mode. It's like, okay, I need to know something. Right? And then we just ask the question. And, a lot can happen when you ask questions.
Yeah.
And you don't know where that door, you open that door and you don't know where it can lead. So that's another great thing about podcasting is the conversations you have on a podcast will bleed into everyday life, and it does make you a way better communicator.
That just also made me reflect on another reason why I want to do this and why I want to have more hosts is call it a selfish reason, but it will help me grow too.
Yeah.
And in my field, you definitely have to be a great communicator because the bad doctors that we refer to are usually just bad communicators.
Yeah.
So,
And you might find a guest who's excellent and you want to bring them back. Now, like, you can have a set policy for how you want to have guests. Me, once a quarter. I'll bring a guest on once a quarter if they want to come back. I want to give them that 3-month, 90-day buffer. But, you know, you could find a guest you have really good chemistry with and you go, you should come back. And next thing you know, they could become a co-host. Right? Or like if you just need someone to fill in, like, hey, I need someone to fill in. Can you fill in? Like, let's do a podcast.
Yeah.
Right? Because you will form these relationships. The very first episode talking with Tarashuk, I spoke to an MLB scout by the name of Phil Ricobono. My friend Chris introduced me to him. He was an MLB scout living in Japan. And now he lives in Las Vegas. So I did another podcast with him recently. And I'm out in Vegas for work. And I was like, hey, I'm going to be in Vegas. What's your number? Let's go up and meet a beer. Let's go up, meet up and have a beer. Right? So, like, I've never met this man. I've only talked to him for a few hours on a podcast about baseball in the JFK assassination.
We have that connection.
And we have that connection.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to a bar, you know, give him a hug when I meet him. It's like I've known him for 15 years.
It's a great way to socialize.
It's weird. It's weird the kind of connections you can have with these guests because it's a bond. It's like an anime bond.
Yeah. So I'm like, this will be a nice community for whoever wants to listen or join.
And like you can have this plan set up. Like you said, you have a pretty good plan. But don't be afraid to change on the spot either.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you do find someone who wants to be a co-host, because a co-host,
I'd like a co-host.
I love having co-hosts.
I'm so down for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of co-hosts. You know, my Kings of the Rings podcast, wrestling podcast, we're three hosts. Me, Ricky, and Kay Murphy. I like the three dynamic because we all bounce off each other pretty well.
Yeah.
I can't do solo shows. I can't do it. I hate them. I hate solo shows for me personally.
Why?
I'm not good at them. I need someone to bounce off of.
Okay, I get that.
You have a name? For the podcast.
For the podcast. Yeah. Medlife Insight.
Medlife Insight. How'd you land on that?
Well, Jared helped me.
That helps.
I was like, I want to give insight on the medical life. Medlife Insight.
Yeah.
And it's similar to the non-for-profit social network community, which is called Medlife Community. So not too original with the second one, but you get the point.
I tell people don't overthink the name.
Yeah.
The name only matters if you're famous. Yeah. Right? Like when someone named Nike, were they like,
yeah.
Were they like, this is it? This is the $1 billion business. Yeah. Or is it after success they go, wow, what a great name.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a very good point.
Names are great in hindsight. Names are great with success.
Yeah.
You know,
what makes a name?
What makes a name?
The success behind it.
You think, you know, Amazon, or they would think from A to Z. Oh, fine, you were a bookstore. Right? Riddle me that one. So, but like, you know, the name Amazon, it evolved into a household name through success. Now people think it's brilliant because of the A to Z thing. That was definitely done by accident.
Yeah.
Because it was originally a bookstore.
Yeah. So we'll see where it goes.
Names. Like, I'm glad you didn't overthink the name. It's just short, sweet, to the point.
Medlife Insight. When you hear it, see it, you know what it's about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Any other questions?
Not for now. I think how to start a podcast. Any field can do it. Any other advice or tips you may have for someone getting into this field besides, you know, what we talked about?
Don't wait too long, right?
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Like, for this how to start a podcast series, I've spent the past few weeks just knees deep or neck deep in pre-production planning and trying to get it just right. And if you try and get it just right, it's never going to be right. You know, you just got to just bite the bullet and just start getting into production.
I have another question.
Go for it.
I actually do have friends that want to get into podcasting, but they're afraid of heat because cancel culture is a big thing.
Avoid politics. That's what I would say.
Yeah. And I guess as long as you're respectful, there's nothing to really be afraid of.
Yeah. Well,
because they're like the things that I want to talk about.
What do they do for work?
Well, one of them is a medical student.
One of them is a medical student.
But he wants to talk about everything and anything. And the other one works in HR. My unprofessional advice was, as long as you're respectful, if someone wants to, you're better off putting yourself out there than
Yes.
hiding because you're afraid of some heat.
I would also say just don't mention your employer. Don't use the name of your employer.
Yeah.
Don't interact as your employer in any way, shape, or form. Be completely individual. You know, if you for some reason have access to the social media accounts for your employer, don't follow your own accounts. Like, you know, like I do have
That's a good
access to my employer's social media. They are not subscribed to anything I do.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I want that completely, even though I'm a contractor, is I want that completely separate.
No, that's a
Do
professional way
not,
of
do
keeping
not
it.
do not bleed over unless
Yeah.
I want it to. You know, like, also just like, you know, it's just a weird thing to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, just avoid politics as a primary. Cause like if you're doing political news, not only because it's a toxic environment, it's a toxic thing to talk about, like you can get attention, but the algorithm is not going to do you any favors.
And there's a little room for growth.
Big tech is going to hold you down so fast because if you do pop off, it's very, very hard to pop off nowadays. But like 5-10 years ago, if you popped off in political news, you kind of not been grandfathered in, but it's so hard to start that kind of a topic. That's the only topic I would say tell someone to avoid, and not because they shouldn't talk about it, just because there's almost no point because a YouTube is going to suppress you.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to put you on a different algorithm as opposed to authoritative sources. That's what they said. They literally said, we are going to de-rank you in the algorithm if you're not CNN, Fox, MSNBC, or even Newsmax, because they're corporations with news. They're authoritative sources. So if you're trying to make a name for yourself on YouTube doing political talk, you're not. You're just not. Like, I mean, I had a podcast called American Minutes where we just talked about, you know, American news and stuff like that. And Nash and I stopped because we didn't fit the model. You know, we weren't on the side. We weren't on the right side, essentially. Like, if you pushed right narrative, you might get pushed. Not as much as the authoritative sources, but you might get pushed. But you got to say the right thing. And it's just, for me, it was just like, it wasn't worth it.
Yeah.
Because I'm too honest. But yeah, if your friends want to get into it, just start. Just do it.
Don't be afraid.
Just figure it out.
Heat is fine. We could stand some heat.
Yeah. Well,
No
heat from who?
That's what I'm saying. Like,
If it's heat from Twitter, who cares?
who cares anywhere?
If it's the heat from the person who writes your paycheck, I get it. I get it. You know, some places
That's freedom of speech. Like, you still have to write my paycheck.
It is, yeah.
As long as you're respectful and you're within your I don't want to say lines. They're not lines, but as long as you watch your back.
Well, if you're in media, you probably can't do a podcast. Certain people out there, it's in their contract, but they can't do a podcast, and they can't do one. Like, it's a lot of red tape in corporate America. So certain jobs might restrict you from doing a podcast. Just ask.
Yeah.
Just ask questions. If you don't know if you can do it, don't but ask.
Yeah.
That was great advice someone gave me one day.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you don't know you can do something, don't do it, but ask if you can.
Yeah.
And you get an answer.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's all my questions. Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you a lot.
It's exciting. It's exciting to see more people doing podcasts. You know, for a long time, podcasting is just something I did. You know, all through college, none of my friends had a podcast. I didn't really know anyone with a podcast.
That's why I'm like, you're the go, man.
You've
been doing this for a minute.
It was just me. Like, I think all my friends in college, because we did it in a frat house. We did our wrestling podcast in a frat house, and it got really loud in that frat house. But luckily, I was upstairs in the corner because I was senior year and president. But that's neither here nor there. But things got really loud sometimes, and all my friends were just like, I don't know why you keep doing this, but the dedication is to be respected. Because I think at that time it was Tuesdays. It's like every Tuesday, my friends would come over, we'd do the podcast, and then they'd leave. The next Tuesday, they'd come back. But it was just the dedication. I think
just keep working.
People aren't surprised that I keep on doing it, but people are so surprised. Like, wow, you really do this for no money, don't you? I'm like, yeah, I do. Yet.
For now.
The keywords for now.
For now.
But yeah, just find a passion, find something you're passionate about, and just
hop on a mic
and chase it. The worst that can happen is no one listens to it. And in that case, it don't even matter.
Yeah. What do you lose, really?
Yeah. It's no growth. Growth takes time.
Yep.
Growth takes time.
Well, I'm excited.
It'll be fun. All right. So that'll wrap it up for this podcast. Thank you all for listening. My name is Will Tarashuk, T's and Thomas, ARA, All my shenanigans can be found. Talking with Tarashuk Podcast can be found anywhere and everywhere podcasts can be found. The YouTube channel, me and Christian will be live on Mondays, probably starting relatively soon. Want to get this series done and done. Follow us on TikTok, APS Podcasts. Talk with Tarashuk on Instagram and all the other socials, YouTube for a lot of clips, videos. A lot of videos from this podcast will be cut, posted, signed, sealed, delivered. But until then, y'all take care.
Bye.
All right. That's it.